What's up, guys? So we've got the Yu-Gi-Oh show. I don't know what episode this is, but we are back with some very awesome guests. So who do we have today?
My name's Dan. I am one of the newer members of the Sanctum squad. You might remember them from older episodes of the podcast. And I don't know where I was going with that. But yeah.
Hi, what's going on? It's Nate from the Sanctum squad, one of the newer members again. Just thought we'd come on and talk some Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah. You might have seen Fabs' Mathmet profile on our channel, who top 8'd one of our winner boxes. So I asked if we could return the favour by being on his channel, and he very nicely obliged. So thank you for having us, first and foremost.
No worries. It's awesome to have you guys on the show. So what we're gonna do, guys, is we're gonna go straight into a bit of a fun topic. So, look, you guys know me. I'm a huge fan of Ignista. That's like one of my most favorite decks, and then by my mat, you know, as well, my favorite deck as well as Dark Lords. What about you guys? What are some of your favorite decks that you guys like playing?
I'll let Dan take it from.
Me and Nate are quite similar, to be fair. We do quite enjoy quite a lot of similar archetypes, but our playstyles are a little bit different. One archetype that I've been like thoroughly in love with since it's dropped is Despia. It's one of the decks that I've stayed with the longest amount of time. The playstyle of it just kind of reminds me of like something like Invoked but stronger, and I really like that's something that I really like. I kind of like decks where you can just play like an engine of like between 15 and 20 cards and just jam it full of like text and stuff. So like one deck I'm really enjoying at the moment is Runic. It's just the unconventional playstyle is just like really fun to me. But I think favorite deck ever, if I had to pick one, going against everything I've said in it, it's probably Adamant's Payers.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, literally, like it's a completely
180.
Side. But like I don't know, like that. I remember when that deck just dropped. It was like the start of lockdown and stuff. I'd picked it up, spending like a lot of time just working on the combos and stuff, and it was just so volatile, so powerful. Like the artwork was sick, man. So I think if I had to pick like my all-time favorite deck, I'd probably go Adamant's Payers. But it's taken quite a fall from grace.
Gosh. I would say like as Dan suggested, we have quite similar decks that we kind of like conjoined in like theory crafting and stuff like that. But my playstyle is a little bit different. Obviously, when Despia dropped, I fell in love with the archetype like so much because that was it reminded me so much of Invoked, but had a little bit more flavor to it in the sense that there was a lot more that you could do with the archetype, and you could combine it obviously with the Brave engine, or you could play it as a pure variant with like the Patchwork package and such. That I just played that deck for God knows how long. Should have taken it to Nats really, but oh well, choices were made.
Yeah, and Nat's stories are for another time. But Nathan took Sword Soul to Nats, and it was very much the wrong choice. I took Despia.
We don't talk about that. And then it was.
And then none of us I had a good Nats experience. I think mine was a bit mad.
I had a good time.
Yours was
I had a good time.
Yeah.
But like it was, and then before then was I played Invoked for a long time, whether that be Shadol's Mech Knights or like a hand trap variant, or even when the Numeron stuff came out. I think I was playing it with that because I played that deck for a while, and it was obviously I just come back into the game. And I was looking for a deck that didn't take a lot of... Because I was still learning everything about the game, and I didn't know what I really wanted to play. And I kind of enjoyed the pure, like, going second variants of decks, like being able to just break apart the board and then being able to, like, set up a few responses so your opponent can't, like, regain advantage. I really
Didn't you top a regional with Danger Dark World in like 2019?
I was so sure he was going to bring that up. I was like, Danger, that's what I remember. That it was like, I remember one of my first regionals, and I played against him, and he was playing Danger Dark World blind second, like all gas, like he had all the energy. I was so sure you.
Yeah, I remember you sending me the profile, going like, I was like, yeah, I'm going to play this at a regional for banter, and I was like, yeah, it looks fun, man. And then he was like, yeah, I did really well. I was like,
yeah, it wasn't as great as I thought. It was like I missed out on Top Cut by having a few misplays in the earlier rounds. I think that was also the regional where quite a lot of the Birmingham lot did.
Yeah, Ahmad came second, Sammy came fourth. Sammy was on the tear. He won a regional the day before and then won that. Sorry, he topped regional the day before, then topped that one. So it was like back to back.
Yeah, Kieran was.
I remember that weekend.
Kieran
Sammy
well,
he was on crud, man. Shout out to Sammy.
Was a lot of, but like all-time favorite deck. Ooh, that's a this is an odd pick, but
Yeah.
I think my all-time favorite deck would have to be like I've said this before in like the Sanctum videos, but like Fire Fist was the all-time favorite deck for me, only because of like nostalgia, and I think it was like one of the first ultis that I ever got was like Fire Fist Bear, and
Very good looking
I
deck,
just
you
hold
know.
that very close to my heart. But
Yeah, it's a cool
Yeah.
deck.
I think I remember the first time I played you, Fabs, and it was we're going back now. I think we're going back to maybe like 2018, and I think you were playing Endymion, I think it was, and I was playing that combo Blue Eyes thing with all the Guard Dragons and stuff.
I do remember that, yeah. Because you used to play that, and you used to play Thunder Dragon a bit as well, didn't you?
Yeah. I played Thunder Dragon. I think pretty consistently over Eternal format. I think. Yeah. But like,
I love Endymion. Endymion to me is the only true pendulum archetype. All the other ones are fake.
it's, Pendulum's like such a weird one for me, but anyway.
I love it for the just like the bonkers combos you can make, but then there was also it's kind of fallen off a little bit.
Back in the day, Pendulum, it used to feel insane. Some of the creativity with the combos that you could do, it was just mad. You could just bring everything in, and like you would start with one board, and you'd literally like when people talk about 10 negates. To me, old Pendulum is realistically 10 negates. Like you would just have like 2 Mighty Masters, then you have some Jackals, and then you have a secret village up, and then it was just nuts.
You might have like an Appaloosa or something kicking around as well.
The deck was really insane.
I think that was
like
like the first deck that I got
too.
introduced to, like properly when I came back into the game around about 2019. I was watching a lot of Nimnin's videos, and it was like that was the deck he was building with sealed only, and then I realized just how nuts the deck can be if it's built properly.
Yeah.
And then I played against you at I think it was Leicester Regional 2019, and you were on the deck, and I saw you in like the last round. And I was like, "Come on, man!"
Yeah, I'll say that regional. I think I ended up going 9th, so I just missed out on top. I was really sad. I was like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
No, in fact, no. I played you in the round before the last because this is what happened. Yeah, I've never done this story before, but
because I fumbled last round.
So yeah, I got lucky. I got lucky against you actually because our game was really close. But then my next round was against some Salad player, and like I don't know if you guys know, but back in the day, Endymion versus Salad was free. Like as Endymion is a really nice deck.
I can imagine, to be honest.
Yeah, because Mighty Master basically when he's on board, you can pretty much can't target him, and he's going to keep coming back to hand, and then also you can nuke the whole board. So I was against the Salad player, and it's like game 1, I won. Game 2, it's like there's no way I lose this game 2. It's so free. I have so many cards, and then the guy just keeps checking his graveyard every day. He checks his graveyard like 4 times. I was like, what are you checking, bro? There's no gazelle, there's nothing. And then time ran out. And see, this is quite early in my Yu-Gi-Oh career. Like nowadays, I'd just call a judge straight away because like I know what I'm meant to do. But at that time, I was trying to be nice in these things, but I was just so upset afterwards. And even afterwards, I called the judge and I was like, he was clearly slow playing, and I was like, but the judge was like, well, you should have called me before. Can't do anything about it now. But
it's frustrating, but
that kind of attitude, like from the judge, it's just like, oh, you should have called. But like, you don't know in those scenarios. Like, you can get so tilted during like I've done it throughout like many regionals and such where I've been like so tilted by a decision like my opponent like made or like a situation like that, and I've just not called the judge because I've been so angry, like frustrated.
I think it's interesting that you bring that up now, because that's kind of brought me onto something that I wanted to talk about a little bit. Like, are there any particular like, not necessarily like bad beat stories, but like any maybe like games that really stick out in your mind where you think like, you know, you really could have turned it around, or if there was just it was like a really bad, not a bad experience I want to say, but just something where it was just like, oh my, but you come out of the game and you're just like, I'm so happy that's over.
Every single time I've been slow played. Every single time.
That's fair. I can completely respect
Literally,
that.
it was the case of like 2 instances where that really sticks out. Was my first round at Nats. I was playing against some kid playing, I think it was Brave Despia. Yeah, that was it. And I go to cut his deck. Like, I basically get into a game state where I'm about to win, but and there's literally nothing he can top deck unless it's Branded Fusion or Pot of Desire, Pot of Prosperity. He goes Prosp for 6, sees Branded Fusion. I was like, that's fine. And then we go to game 2, and he offers me his deck to cut. What I like to do sometimes is I like to shuffle and then do a cut just in case of obviously, you know about the stacking rules.
Yeah.
And then he calls me out and says, "You cannot do that."
Wait, what?
what do you mean I can't shuffle and cut? This is the whole point. And I was really tilted, so I decided to cut his deck into like multiple piles just in case. But I didn't call the judge over, and it was just painful. And then it was the same. There was another thing with Wirral Regional. My opponent was playing 60 card PK,
Jesus.
and it's an insanely long game one because in those 60 cards, like you're just pulling out combos, Scythe Lock, DP, all this kind of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And then
you need to really know what you're doing with that deck as well, I imagine.
Yeah. So that's why he was taking so long. So game one, literally sets up Scythe Lock. My hands all fusion spells. We got to game two. Game two, I batter him. And then game three, we got like 4 minutes left on time. And he's just there doing his combo. He knows that there's 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But just decides to do the combo anyway because he knows like he'll win it out or something like that, and it ends up being like a draw or something. And I was lit.
Yeah, that's one of the bit of unfortunate things I'd say, that it's gotten even worse now from before, where it just feels like game three, a significant proportion of the time, just comes down to essentially who can abuse the time rules better. So it's like,
dude, like at the regional on Saturday, like one of our friends' first game ones, he was playing Runic and his opponent was playing Tears, and he had the Munin down, gained 1,000. Like there was a few minutes on the clock, like it was like, really good position. And his opponent mills the Ladybug and it just goes to a draw. That was so funny.
And it's like, the thing is, I think people, like anyone who's listening has to realize that it's like, I'm not insulting when I say it's who can abuse the time rules more, because I recognize the notion of do what it takes to win. That's why the same reason why I don't necessarily criticize anyone for playing Mystic Mine or anything. But I also think I don't think it's a particularly interesting or interactive way to play the game. I blame Konami. I don't blame the player, basically. If you're a player, do what you have to do to win.
I think that's why decks
I've definitely, like, you know, not, I don't want to say slow play, but like I've definitely, like, you know, made Munin with 2 minutes on the clock to gain 1,000.
Of course.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think that's why Striker was also a really good deck as well, because like it abused the new time rules to the point where you could literally just not even stall up, but like slow the game state down to the point where you are getting to that time rule, and then you
The deck used to grieve me playing against that deck.
High Arte Swing.
To be honest.
Sky Striker used to terrorize me, but not because the deck was good. I played Endymion a lot. Look, Endymion, it was a horrible match for Striker. However, there is one Sky Striker player at our locals who he at that time, that's the only deck he played. It was Josh, obviously, and
shout out to Josh.
He was insane at Striker. I don't think I ever took a game off him with Endymion. It was mad. Like, it's like, you know when you know your deck is stronger. Like I have full confidence my deck is stronger, but I just couldn't beat him. He was just very good. So much. And it's funny because now when I come up against, because I played against him so much, when I come up against Striker players in regionals, I'd always feel good because I'm like, you know what, guys, I know you're not better than the guy I play against. I know you're definitely not better than him, so I'm probably gonna win. But
I felt like a lot of that about nationals, actually, because like one of the boys that we were testing with, top 60 forward with Adventurer Punk, shout out to Tom Hartz. And like we were testing like religiously, like before Nats, like got the tickets, just like boom, alright, we're gonna test. Like, and I was testing against him like maybe like every other night. So like, and a lot of my matchups were against Punk Adventurer. So like, I knew the deck inside out. I knew like exactly where to hand trap. Like, you know, what plays they were going to make if they were in a good position or a bad position. Like, so I think it's really good. Like, if you can like, your testing circle is good. Like, it makes you a better player.
Yeah. If your community's good, like if the circle around you is built up of good players who know their decks and can like effortlessly just do the plays in their sleep, I think you're in a better position because you know what you're going to be coming up against these regionals.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also just nice. Like, I don't know, me personally, it's like I think when you're around, it's like being casual is fine, but if you're around people who aren't that interested in the game, aren't that committed to getting better as well, for me it gets boring. Like, part of the enjoyment of a game is that pursuit of mastery, getting good at the game. That's one of the reasons I was telling some people this weekend, that's what I like about Yu-Gi-Oh, that I know that I'm not amazing, and getting better, seeing myself be better than I was last week is like, that's part of what's fun about the game as well.
100%, man.
Yeah, exactly.
In the regional last weekend that me and Fabs went to, like it was my first regional top. Like, I know, like I got top 8. I felt really good about that, and it was like definitely me. Like, it was a good way for me to show that, like, you know, actually, like I have been improving and stuff, and like it made me
Yeah.
feel really good about myself. Like, and I know like to a lot of people, like a regional top 8 might not be much, but like to me, it's like it is, isn't it? Like it's like you said, it's a good way of
Yeah.
engaging that you've
That you've
you know,
practically
been a better
changed.
player.
Like you're not the same player you was a year ago, which is nice. Like
Yeah,
that,
yeah, of
to me,
course.
that
Yeah.
would be the bad things. Like if I was the same level of skill, I was like, and to be honest, for some people that's probably fine. Where they're fine, they're just playing it for fun. That's calm as
It
well.
Yeah.
depends what you want out of the game.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I'd say for me, Yu-Gi-Oh definitely it's that it's that pursuit of mastery that I find the most interesting. But what we're gonna do, guys, is we're gonna move on to a very interesting topic, which is it's two things. So, we've all been watching the YCSs lately, and it's been really interesting. We've been seeing a lot of I'll say interesting deck profiles top. One of the main things we've noticed, I'd say, is firstly that Mystic Mine is obviously absolutely shattering everyone. So, for example, at Euros, at YCSs, it's very common that the top deck is playing like mainly Mystic Mine or something like that.
Yeah.
Or they're playing like, so we had a Mystic Mine burn deck top in Brazil.
Won Brazil, didn't it?
Yeah, one Brazil, sorry.
Yeah.
At Euros, I think all of the top decks were playing 3 Mystic Mine, things like that. What do we think about that right now, guys? In terms of the state of the game and Mystic Mine and rivalry, essentially, and floodgates in general. What's our opinion on that?
Mine, I think, is a necessary evil right now. In terms of like we are playing against, so like tiers, for example, will often just go off, and there's not really much you can do to stop that. Even if you open like multiple hand traps, like you're pretty much just going to be if you're going second, obviously, and then you're walking into a already established board. There's not really a lot you can do in that game one scenario, which I think mine definitely helps with. And there are also a lot of combo decks in the meta at the moment where mine is
They
definitely
utilize it as like a lingering copy of DRNM, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. You have to I think it's weird in this format where you're having to play like 10 cards that say your opponent cannot respond.
Yeah.
And just to basically get the game state swing in your favor.
Yeah.
Because you'll have to play.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Oh no, I was going to say that I think that's actually a really, really effective way of putting it. That I never thought of it with that, but it's literally you're not even like you're playing like Dark Rune and more Mine and stuff, but you're not playing it like and then you just win. You're playing it literally just to have a chance to even play the game in the first place, which
Exactly.
is quite mad when you think about it.
It's a terrible way to see it, but like yeah.
I think it's in terms of like a deck that actually like kind of revolves around Mystic Mine. Like when we were going into Nats, like I had all this stuff for the deck, so I put it together. I was like, look, we're gonna come up against this. Like it's worth testing against it. Like, and the one thing that I found like piloting it was that it's so brittle. Like that's why people are playing it. Like you have the 8 cards, you Mystic Mine, you Demise, you whatever. Like you need the strategy around it. Like Striker's a really good example of it. So I played I played Runic at the regional and I played the Mine package because it is kind of like a more stunny control based deck. But to be honest, when I was playing that deck, I kind of felt like it wasn't the Mine that was carrying me. Like it was good, but it wasn't like I won because of Mystic Mine. So to me, I think if you're centering your deck around Mystic Mine, like it's I don't really know what the phrase to use to describe it is, but I think it's brittle. I think.
Yeah, I think people who know how to play mine are also the kind of people who know how to play around it, and then also know how to help at a specific time.
Also, the thing I wanted to mention as well is like with tiers specifically, being able to mill eradicate or epidemic virus and just activate it. Like it doesn't even matter if you have the Mystic Mine.
I think it's one of those things where they also like main deck a few outs as well. I know that people in old tiers. Yeah,
I think them main in Galaxy Cyclone like is a really strong it's a really strong choice to be honest. Like Jake from Sanctum Squad was the first person who kind of was like, yeah, definitely need to main Galaxy Cyclone, and it just makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it was
I don't
with
think
like old VA list as well.
I don't think Mystic Mine is a necessary evil, but I also don't think it's necessarily unfairer than. I don't want to say the tiers builds because I don't think the tiers end board is what's impressive about it. It's the grind game that it has. If you know what I mean.
Yeah. Actually, you go on that, and then I'm gonna go into my point.
Yeah, that's fine. like when I meant it was a necessary evil, it was more that I don't know. With so many decks running around that obviously set up these big board presences, and that like Dark Ruler doesn't work very well unless you have something else to go with it. And then you also, and I think mine definitely helps with that. But I think we've been seeing it so much that if it was on the ban list, I wouldn't mind. Like the cards have been around for so long that it just needs to go.
I think biggest thing for me that's been like, it needs to go is the fact that it's just been abused in like every single deck. It's like it's become too generic. Like when it was just like, oh, it's just like a Mystic Mind burn deck, or it was like only Striker really that was playing it, or like, you know, a few slower control builds that realistically, you know, they weren't really able to keep up to speed. I think it was fine in those aspects, but like it's just become too big. Like I think realistically it has to go.
Yeah, I'd say so. This is the thing, and Three Stacks did a video on this recently, and I think his perspective was generally what I've thought so well. And so I'm someone who, for the first 2 or 3 years of playing competitively, I only played rogue decks, and so I feel like my perspective on, and then now I pretty much only play meta decks or meta-ish decks. I think Mathmech is third best deck in the format, so in my opinion, it's better.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely, 100% agree.
But when you're playing rogue, I feel like one of the things you get an appreciation for is just how big the gap is between meta and rogue. And as someone who only has played competitive, a lot of the times I feel like people are a little bit ignorant to that now. I know some people are going to think this is scrub mentality and stuff, but it's kind of like what you just said, Nathan. It's like tiers, essentially everything that tier does is fundamentally a bit unfair. Same with Sprite. Every card in Sprite gets you another card and then gets you another card. Same with Runic. Runic just gets to kind of ignore the way decks play. And if you're not playing one of those 3 decks, your only chance to compete is to play unfair cards. And one of the big complaints I hear often, both about Floodgates and mine, is that it's like it's unfair, it's uninteractive gameplay. But what Three Stacks was saying was that, and I really agree with this by the way, is he was like, all your opponent is trying to do is to not let you play the game. They're trying to build up such a big board that you can't do anything. And so, in my opinion, what's the difference between my opponent setting up this tier board with like 3 or 4 negates and then also ripping my hand with Eradicator, or Sprite setting up like 6 negates and having another 6 cards in hand? What's the difference between that and me flipping up Mystic Mind? To me, it's the same nonsense at the end of the day. At the end of the day, I can't play the game. And one of the things that I saw a lot on Facebook was, so when you use the hyperbole of 5 negates, 6 negates, I'm not literally talking about 6 negates. It's not that. That's not the point that I'm making. The point
It's
is
an oppressive board.
It's an oppressive board. They go so far ahead that you can't trade 1 for 1, because if you trade 1 for 1, you will lose. And that's what I think is a bit ridiculous about every combo deck going first, pretty much. So that's why, me personally, when I see Mystic Mind, I don't see it as cheap. I don't see it, and I think it's also necessary for the game. I think Mystic Mind is bad card design, but current combo decks are also, in my opinion, not particularly great card design, and hand traps are also not particularly great card design. People get upset that you have to run multiple outs just to deal with Mystic Mind, but they don't seem to realize that hand traps are the same nonsense for combo decks. You have to run 12 or 15 hand traps to deal with combo decks, because combo decks are so oppressive. So it's the same thing, just for another.
No, I think is, No, I think it's interesting. Like, I only just thought about this when you just said it. Never seen anyone complain about having to run outs in their main deck to combo decks.
Exactly.
But people always seem to people always seem to complain about the fact that they have to run an out to Floodgates or Mystic Mind. But why is it fine to run outs for combo decks and not outs for back row decks?
Like, and you can't just run one. You run like 50, you run like 15 or 12. You dedicated like a significant proportion of the deck just to being able to play against combo. Yeah.
I think going back to what you were saying about Three Stacks' point, I think that's a really interesting point that he's made, and I've said this to a few people before, and I do kind of believe it to a degree. I do think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is now going to, like, it's gone past the point of no return, I think, unless there's like a master rule revision or something that will slow the game down. I think it has just kind of evolved to pick your poison of like how unfair do you want to be. And there's nothing wrong with that, because, you know, if you're playing a competitive game, you're going to use the most efficient tactics available, and you'd be a fool not to. But that's why I kind of think that our Mystic Mind is fine for what it was meant to be originally. It's just kind of just become too. It has to go in it, I think, personally.
I also think like the weirdest thing is that the meta has kind of evolved now from a few months ago, when it was like 5-6 decks that could compete and could be like the best deck, to
add on that, they were all quite fair decks.
Yeah, because there was Deathbeer Sword Soul, Punk Adventurer, can't remember. Those are the three that stand out, but there were also like quite. Yeah, there were a few more, and then obviously.
Yeah, because well, there was those three decks. I'd say the one thing I would say that was unfair last format was definitely Scythe. Scythe was a problem, and it's still been a problem. But I do agree that Despians also, I think they were very inherently balanced. That because they were completely counterable. You flip D barrier or super ancient organism, and they just don't get to play. Which I actually think is it's fair to have that kind of counter to a specific type of deck.
Or you just have Brand Fusion and the turn stops.
Yeah.
I think one thing I'll say, just sorry before we move on, is in terms of the argument against floodgates versus combo, is I think that a lot of people just are like, oh, flipping a floodgate takes no skill. And I think that's why people get like raging about it. And while I don't necessarily disagree, I think if you're playing like a trap deck, like not a floodgate deck, like a trap deck, like something like Eldritch back in the day when you were playing disruptions and things like that. I think sometimes it can take like, I don't want to say as much brain power, because I don't think it does if you're playing a deck with a lot of different combo lines. But if you're playing a deck that's kind of one note, I don't think it's overtly more difficult. And I think that's where a lot of hate for floodgates comes from, to be honest, because you just kind of like slap it down on the board, and it's like if you have the out, then you do it. If you don't, you don't.
Yeah, and I actually I had this discussion with a friend a while ago, and I 100% agree. I don't actually necessarily see combo decks as taking more skill, and I'm someone who, for the most part, for most of my Yu-Gi-Oh career, I've played decks that are closer to combo decks, and I'll say that the skill in combo decks, so combo decks have essentially more choice, is the way I see them. So if I'm playing a combo deck, I get stopped at point X, I can usually do this or that, and it's about finding the line. So a good example is I used to play Lyra Lush Tri Brigade, and one of the things I felt about that deck is that when I was at my best with that deck, I felt like there's no way I can lose, because it's like I know that I always have another option. But I think that's part of what made the deck just a bit unfair as well, because it felt like my opponent, it didn't matter how many hand traps they had. My cards are more efficient, so if I get the right combo route, I win. Whereas when I was playing Eldritch, I played Eldritch for just one format, and like, I would say that was also difficult because my decisions actually mattered. In Lyra Lush Tri Brigade, if I mess up a combo line sometimes, it literally doesn't matter because I've just got more extended, so I win. In Eldritch, if I flip up my trap at the wrong time, I lose. My decision actually matters. And so I wouldn't say that combo decks are inherently more skillful in my opinion. I think learning a combo, I'm sorry, it's really not. It's just remembering how to do a combo. It's not that hard. People like to really, really pat themselves on the back for remembering how to do full sprite combo or whatever and stuff. It's like, it's not that hard, buddy. It's that all the cards search each other. You're not doing anything particularly revolutionary. Like every now and again, I'll see something really cool and really effective with a meta deck, but by and large, the majority of people playing Sprite or the majority of people playing tier, they're playing the same build, they're doing the same combo. It just happens that you're merely milled 3 tier names, like you didn't do anything special. You're just playing a good deck.
You're just good at variants. That's all it is.
Yeah. I think there are combo decks that do have a lot of those different lines, but for the most part, I definitely have to agree with you.
Yeah. That's like every now and again we get a combo deck that's like actually okay. It does require a little bit. Like again, that's what I feel like. Genuinely felt like Lyra Lush Tri Brigade at the time was a very creative combo deck that had a lot of lines and a lot of different ways to play it. And like I think so too. I felt like there was a concerted difference between. There wasn't Yishan. There was a YouTuber who was it Nesh? I don't know. There was someone who did like the combo sheet, and the guy who did the combo sheet, it's like you could tell he was it Nesh? Yeah, you could tell he understood that deck to a level that most people didn't. And so it's like my Lyra Lush Tri Brigade and his were completely different decks because he was doing a lot. But then
he made like he also did a spreadsheet for Spite and then decided like the guy knows when he sticks to a deck or when he knows like what he's going to go with, he'll just map out every single line and go, oh, okay, so if this happens, blah 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 blah. And I think what you were saying as well with like the combo decks like Lyra Lush Tri Brigade, for example, you just have, in comparison, obviously, to like the floodgate decks, you have so many like more lines. If your play gets stopped, you're just like, oh, so stop this. Oh, okay, that's fine. And then whilst you're playing like stuff like Eldritch, you have to know when to use your cards at the most effective time. Otherwise, you're just literally handing your opponent the game.
Yeah, that was part of what made Verte so frustrating because they just combo decks now always had an incredible game plan where it was like I combo. Do you stop my combo? I come. Verte DPE, now I win. So it was like you couldn't do anything about it.
Fair. It was a case of like you would just wait and just see, oh, okay, I'll just get stopped.
It's like in PK. It was like, did you just nib me? All right, calm. I kept the what's that card? That trap called Shade Brigandine in my hand. I'm gonna summon that. Make 2 Link Spiders. Make Verte.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just helped me. Oh my god.
I'm glad Verte's gone.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
I'm very happy Verte and DP are gone. Like, Verte was just a stupid card, and yeah, I don't really understand.
It was just Nightmare Mermaid 2.0, wasn't it? Like, you got 2 monsters. Oh,
Literally.
guess I win.
Well, it's fine. All we need is Hulk gone and then bans now, joking.
You know, the funny thing is, I don't actually think Hulk is that unfair. I think the problem with Hulk is kind of the things it leads to. But in itself, in a vacuum, I think it's actually a relatively good card. But I don't know why it didn't have some sort of clause that said you can only synchro summon after using this. It should have.
Yeah.
Or like if it was like 2 Crystron monsters it needed or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing that I've found about Hulk and Dagda and what have you, things like that, in the formats where they're broken, they're so broken, like it's not even fair. Like, but then you go into a format like the one we're in currently, and not a lot of decks are playing Hulk and DPE. Like in terms of like the top decks anyway. Not DPE, sorry, Dagda, like the side lock. Like you still have decks that do, but like the top 3 decks like probably aren't playing it. So like people seem to stop, like I don't want to say stop caring, but it's like, you know, not as much ban this filth.
Like if you see the top decks that aren't playing it, you'll just kind of
Just
funnel
forget
and
about it, innit?
Yeah, literally. And that's why everyone was like so on it when it came to Punk Adventurer format, because the deck could literally extend and then also set up. Oh, I have a negate. Oh, I have a psych block. Oh, I can make a Baron. Oh, I can do this.
Like,
And then nowadays it's like.
So at the time of recording this, we haven't had a ban list yet. But I think, do you remember that ban list where they just killed Eternal format, but they also hit all the tier 2 decks as well, like Pendulum, Draco, what have you? I feel
that
like
was
if we're going to
so
have a ban
sad.
list, need a ban list like that where it's going to take care of stuff, but it's also just going to hit cards like Hulk and Scythe and whatnot. Because
we almost had that like last list. Like last list was really good in the sense that we had Protoss went. The Simorg Bird went, which made the whole Lyrilusc.
You're thinking of the list before. Like,
is that the list before?
List where Verte went.
Yeah, something towards. I think the January that like are always like high up.
It's big in it.
Like Massacre, because they'll know that like we've had this disgusting format. Let's hit some of the disgusting cards. You know.
Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate because I almost don't see a point in us having OCG and TCG split formats, because even when they do that, there's always just a new busted deck coming. So it's like, for example, even now I know Konami's unlikely to do anything relevant to Tier, even though realistically speaking, both Tier and Sprite deserve big hits, and Tier is only going to get worse when the Ishizu cards come out. But Konami can't do anything about it. So it's a bit annoying.
I'd be inclined to disagree, to be honest. I don't think they'll hit the deck directly, but I think Curious is going to go. I think some aspect of the Sprite cards will get hit, maybe if that's like, you know, maybe like something like Diva or Swap Frog or whatever. And purely, the only reason I say this is just because when you look at the top 64, top whatever breakdowns, there's it's so oppressive by like 2 decks, and I don't think it's a tier 0 format, but I think it's like a very kind of oppressive format where I think if you don't get one of these decks and you're not piloting it well, you are at a little bit of a disadvantage if you're not prepared for these decks. Yeah. So in that respect, I'd say I think the decks are going to get checked, but I don't think it's going to be like, right, this deck's just come out, we're going to just massacre it, because that's not a good from a business point of view.
I also think that the worst thing as well is just in the OCG they've kind of already been power crept, because what's the new archetype? I can't remember. It's the psychic one that has, those cards when they officially release in the TCG. That's going to be mad.
Well, one of the things that's actually interesting though is in the OCG, actually Tier is still dominating. So even with, and the sad thing is Shatra and Bisted are both supposed to counter Tier, but nope, Ishizu Tier is still dominating. And
they just had the list, haven't they, where they've put like all the ones that mill 5 to 1, and they've hit the field spell, I think it is.
So Happiness is at 1, the field spell is at 1, and then the 2 Ishizu cards.
But the thing about Tiers, I would say, is that even though they're getting hit, it's kind of like, I'd say the nature of the deck is that every card is giving you the same level of advantage almost. So it's like the hits are a bit annoying, but I don't think it's going to be enough to remove Tia. And then also, Splight got hit way harder than Tia, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, starter and shit for what? What?
Exactly.
Bro, I can search Max D in the OCG though, innit? Like, so I get
Yeah.
it. But
No.
But that's
To
the
be
thing.
honest-
Even for 2 formats, Sprite hasn't been top deck. When Tier came out, Tier slowly started to beat it. Then as soon as Shizu came out, people were barely playing Sprite.
That's what I mean. Like, if you look at the topping list from the last like few YCSs, Sprite hasn't even come close to taking any of the top spots, and I
Yeah.
think it's mainly due to the the predictability of the deck. Like, you always know that your opponent's going to be ending on like Elf, Toad, blah 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 blah. Whilst like, and also the fact of we don't have Maxi in this format, so the deck becomes a little bit more like, oh god.
Yeah.
And
I would say as well. So one of the things, and it's actually something I see a lot on Facebook. So I think people aren't very good at understanding how top cut representation or what it tells you about decks. I'm gonna quickly run through it because I actually think. So essentially, when you look at top cut representation, the first top cut. So let's say there's top 64. The percentages there tell you what decks are strong in the format at the moment. So that's why you see a big amount of Sprite and a big amount of Tier at top 64. That's the most important statistic in my opinion. Everything after that is less relevant. The reason why we don't see Sprite top as much, and the reason why Rico will win a Mystic Mind Burn is because top card after that, so if you have top 64, top 32 now tells you how strong those decks are in relation to each other, as does top 16, top 8, top 2, and what eventually wins. So when a deck wins, for example, as Rika won, as Mystic Mind Burn won, and all these decks win, as Exosister wins, this doesn't mean that these decks are good. All it really tells you is that these decks and those players are very good against Tier. That's all it's really told you, because they've decided to counter that deck specifically. And it's one thing I see on Facebook. People will be like, this deck, oh, it made it to the top, it must be a good deck. But no, it's still a Sprite and Tier format. Just because Sprite hasn't won doesn't mean that it's not a good deck. It just means that it's not the strongest deck out of the topping decks. That's all it really says.
and I think they've had a lot of like experience against that deck, so that they can get this top.
I think as well, there's a different when you go into a large event. I think there's a difference between building your deck specifically for top cut and building a deck specifically for the rest of the event. Because if you build your deck to do well in the top cut, like you're more than likely going to do decently across the board in your format and like your Swiss rounds, if you're a good pilot, that is, because you can play cards like, I'll play this to counter, the rogue deck that's doing okay, like. Then you make it to top cut and you just get wiped out, and it's just like, oh, There's a difference in it's deck building is like you have to go into it with a good mindset, I think, and which is why I think rogue decks have been doing very well, because Exosister absolutely handed like my backside to me at the regional, and it's been doing absolute bits, like, because it's a really good pick against the top decks. Like same with Rika, like it can play things that are just inherently good against decks like Sprite and Tears, but you're definitely right. That does not mean that Sprite and Tears aren't the best decks.
Exactly.
It just
they're just not as good against the top decks. And just links to your original point. Pack did a really good series on your original point about it was Pack and Jesse Cotton when Jesse Cotton was training Pack, and it's about building for top cut and stuff and differences in deck building basics. And I would say anyone who is interested in getting better, you should definitely go and watch that series. Like, there's just so many keys in that. Like, the amount of knowledge Jesse Cotton has is insane. And it's just sometimes he would just mention something off the cuff like it's obvious, and I'm like, dude, what the heck? Like, no, that's not obvious. I never knew this. Like,
it's not obvious, mate.
So it's a really good series. I'd recommend. And he goes specifically into your point about building essentially to win event and building to top.
It does kind of bring me on to something else I did want to discuss a little bit as well. What do you think the most important lesson you've learned about the game, like through playing the game, has been?
Pace yourself. Literally, just like if you're going into a big event, make sure that you know how to like properly chill out in between those rounds. Because
and
I remember
take care of yourself as well.
Yeah, I remember when like going to my first regional and stuff like that, I didn't realize how long it was going to be. So I ended up like hardly eating before I went in, hardly drinking anything, and then by the time that we got to fourth round, I was mentally exhausted, and it was the same thing. Like, it was the same thing with Nats as well, I guess, because that was a really awkward experience if you like couldn't get I don't know, food or hydration because you would be sat there for 8 rounds, and then you would just be
And
like,
it was on one of the hottest days of the year as well.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, yeah, it was. That was
it was
was
like 33
unfair.
degrees in a dark hall with like hardly any windows or doors open and no aircon, so you're there just like drown, like
it
literally
was
just
pretty nutty.
dying.
Yeah, I would say for me, personally, the biggest lesson I've learned in Yu-Gi-Oh is don't buy stuff off eBay randomly. Don't buy off vendors randomly. In general, if you see a new deck and you want it, don't just buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
wait
a really good
while,
lesson.
play the deck online, work out if
Oh.
it's even worth the money, think about it really, really hard, and then still don't buy it. Borrow it off your friend because you'll just waste money, and then it'll get reprinted.
Yeah. Shout out to
You
shout out
could
to all
buy
the
out
twisting
the
circles.
staples as well. Like I remember when Jesse, no, it was Jaime in YCS Charlotte was playing Foolish Returns
Yeah,
as like a counter for Eldritch, and then everyone just started buying out Foolish Returns.
I remember that night because we were on a Discord call with Tom and we were talking about it, and like you two were talking about if it was good or not, and I just went on eBay and I bought like a play set for £3. Like,
You bought my playset that was in my
yeah,
bag.
you were like, oh, I've got it in my bag. I don't know whether to pull the trigger, and I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna take this.
yeah, yeah. Definitely, Yu-Gi-Oh has a way of taking all of your sense and taking your money with it. Like it really.
Yeah.
does.
I think that's a good point because I think there's probably two that I've picked up in terms of money. It's definitely be smart with your money. Like if you're going to put money into it, put money into things that you know are going to get used across a lot of different decks, like staples, and
Yeah.
instead of spending £150 on a deck core, spend £150 on Pot of Prosperities, for example,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you
I
know,
think
a
that's-
good can traps and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's something that I learned from you as well. Is just like to be more resourceful with money as well, because of course picking up a new deck core is nice, and obviously if it's a deck you've been looking after for a while, then that's fine.
You know what
But,
it is, I
like,
think as well. Sometimes if you pick up a new deck core and you don't do well with it, I think it can leave like a little bit of a bitter taste.
That is a horrible feeling.
Yeah. Whereas if you've spent, I don't know, say if you bought Lightning Storms, for example,
Yeah.
and well, you might not have done too well in the tournament, but you can be like, oh my god, when Lightning Storm came up, it was so clutch.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
I think that's a better feeling. But I think as well, one of the biggest things that I learned about just about the game in general from that is like more of it is in your head than you think it is, and a lot of it is about the mentality you play. Because I'm going to go into a little bit of a story time here. Like I know you boys didn't ask, but so like at Nats, I lost my first 2 rounds, and I was X2, and I was like, oh man, like I'm not doing very well here. Like I feel like I'm like, you know, if I don't do too well, I might just drop. Then I don't know what happened, but something clicked in my head, and I was like, every other player you are going to play from here on out is going to have this exact same mentality. And the way that I felt when I was having that conversation with myself, like, you know, I might as well just drop. I felt like I'd already lost in my own head, and I was like, if people are going to have this conversation, there are people in this room who are having this conversation with themselves in it. If I go in there with the mentality that like I'm going to win, or I'm going to be more likely to win purely because I have a better outlook on this match than you, then it's kind of like a law of attraction thing almost. Like you kind of you can almost will it into existence, and I think it says a lot that I think I only lost one other match that day, and I finished the rest of the day in X3.
Wow.
So I was just like, I'm really happy that I didn't drop, and like I found myself making like a lot more comfortable decisions because I was like, yeah, like know that I'm going into this with like the right mentality. I think that like even if I don't win, like I feel like I'm more invested in this match than you because I'm going to be looking at things and like, you know, I'm not going to be making misplays or anything like that just because I feel like I'm a little bit down or like, you know, I'm not doing as well as I wanted to be because I went into Nats with no expectations in it.
Yeah.
But like, we all know what it's like when you go to a tournament. You might not have any expectations, but you're still feeling a little bit down because you're not doing too well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you
exactly.
do kind of lose to yourself, I think, in that respect.
100%.
And then I could have made maybe a top 128, I think, but I got masked in my last round, and it is what it is.
yeah, I remember
Yeah,
you saying.
I definitely felt a lot better about it from that perspective. So I think it's like, don't count yourself out, like, and also just a little point, just know when to scoop. Because like, if your opponent's going full combo, you got nothing in your hand, nothing you draw is going to just scoop in it, like save the time.
I definitely. I think that's a really potent point on the kind of essentially just not necessarily giving up and just having that mentality. Especially if you spent money, you spent effort to come to that event. You might as well kind of have that positive mindset and like try and pull something in rather than just giving up and being like, oh, I'm going to lose. Let me go.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because like my goal
I
for
think
Nats was just to not drop.
Yeah, I think that's an also important point to think about as well. It's just like have appropriate preparation, because I think many people on the way to Nats was like, looking at like top representation and YCSs and all that was just like, I'm gonna pick this deck. I haven't had a lot of experience from it, but I'm gonna pick this deck because it's a good counter to this. And then when they went into the
Yeah.
event, like there wasn't like enough
wasn't the
practice
same.
there. Like
For a big event,
example,
like anything from like a regionals above, test.
Yeah.
Test solidly. Pick a deck when you've booked the event and just test with it.
Yeah, definitely. So, guys, on that note, I'm actually going to wrap up this episode of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Show. It's been a pretty awesome episode, if I do think so myself. So,
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
definitely. We're definitely going to have some more of the Sanctum squad on this. I think this is a nice little episode that we got into. But
Definitely. I'll be more than welcome to come back. But yeah, once again, to all the listeners, thanks very much for listening to us. I've been Dan from the Sanctum Squad. Nate's been Nate from the Sanctum Squad. Hopefully, Fabs will leave links in the description to the Sanctum Squad YouTube channel. We do a lot of different things like discussions, deck profiles, a little bit of vlogging. You'll find a video of Fabs' Mathmech profile on there, which is absolutely wild. Like, I maintain that you're probably the best Mathmech pilot vocally.
Thank you.
No, like just definitely. But yeah, again, just thanks for having us, man. It's been great. It's been a really enjoyable
thank you for having us, man.
experience.
No worries, guys. Thank you everyone for watching. Peace.
No worries.